Ray Charles's sunglasses fell from his face and shattered on the stage floor. For the first time in 20 years, 15,000 people saw his clouded, sightless eyes. The drunk man who just mocked him from the audience had no idea what he just unleashed. What Ray did next didn't just silence the heckler, it changed everyone in that arena forever. It was November 8, 1963, at the Chicago Amphitheater. Ray Charles was at the peak of his career, having just released Busted and still riding high from the success of Hit the Road Jack. The arena was packed with 15,000 screaming fans who'd paid top dollar to see the man they called the Genius perform live. The evening had started like any other Ray Charles concert. The Raelettes, his legendary backup singers, had the crowd on their feet. Ray's 17-piece orchestra was tight, professional, bringing that signature sound that had made him a household name. Ray himself was in rare form, his fingers dancing across the piano keys with the kind of precision that seemed impossible for a man who couldn't see them. He'd already worked through What I Say, I Got a Woman, and Unchain My Heart. The crowd was electric, but things were about to take a turn nobody expected. In the third row, center section, sat a group of well-dressed businessmen who'd been drinking since before the doors opened. One of them, a heavy-set man in his 40s named Douglas Mitchell, had been getting louder with each song. His friends kept trying to quiet him down, but the whiskey had made him bold, and something about Ray Charles seemed to irritate him in a way he couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was jealousy. Here was a blind black man who'd achieved more success than Mitchell ever would. Or maybe it was just the ugly truth of 1963 America, where some men still couldn't accept that talent had no color and no requirement for perfect vision. Whatever the reason, Mitchell had been waiting for his moment to speak up. That moment came during Georgia on My Mind. Ray had just begun the opening notes, his voice dropping into that low, soulful tone that made the song feel like a prayer. The arena had gone quiet, thousands of people hanging on every word. This was the song that had become Georgia's official state anthem just a few months earlier, a moment of reconciliation between Ray and the state that had once banned him for refusing to play segregated venues. Ray was singing Georgia, Georgia the whole day through when it happened. "Hey Ray, how do you even know what keys you're hitting? You're blind as a bat." The piano stopped. The orchestra stumbled to a confused halt. 15,000 people turned to look at the drunk man in the third row, their faces a mixture of shock and anger. Ray sat frozen at his piano, his signature dark shades perched on his face, his expression unreadable. For a moment, nobody knew what would happen next. Would Ray ignore him? Would security remove the heckler? Would the show just go on? Then something nobody expected occurred. Ray reached up to adjust his sunglasses, but his fingers fumbled. The glasses, those iconic dark shades that had become as much a part of his identity as his voice, slipped from his grip and fell to the stage floor. They shattered on impact. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the suddenly silent arena like a gunshot. And for the first time in over 20 years of performing, Ray Charles sat on stage without his sunglasses. His eyes, clouded by the glaucoma that had stolen his sight at age 7, were visible to everyone. Some people in the front rows gasped. Others looked away, feeling like they were seeing something too private, too vulnerable. Ray's eyes seemed to stare at nothing and everything at once, the physical evidence of a disability he'd spent his entire career transcending. The drunk man in the third row had stopped laughing. Even through his whiskey haze, he realized something profound had just happened, and he'd been the cause of it. Ray's road manager, Joe Adams, started moving toward the stage, ready to step in to protect Ray, to get him new glasses and restore some dignity to the moment. But Ray held up one hand, stopping him. "Leave him," Ray said, quietly into the microphone. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made everyone lean forward. "I want to tell y'all something." He turned his face toward where the heckler's voice had come from, though his sightless eyes couldn't actually see the man. "You asked how I know what keys I'm hitting. That's a fair question, I suppose. Let me tell you a story." The arena was so quiet you could hear the heating system humming. "When I was 5 years old," Ray began, his fingers now resting gently on the piano keys, "I watched my little brother George drown in a wash tub behind our house in Greenville, Florida. I tried to pull him out, but I was too small, too weak. I screamed for my mama, but by the time she got there, George was gone." People in the audience were already crying, but Ray wasn't done. "A few months after that, my eyes started going dark. The doctors said it was glaucoma. By the time I was 7 years old, I couldn't see anything at all. Not light, not shadows, not my mama's face. Nothing but black." Ray's fingers began playing soft, gentle chords on the piano, barely audible but hauntingly beautiful. "I thought my life was over. I was a blind black boy in the Jim Crow South with no daddy and no money. What kind of future did I have? None, according to most folks. They wanted to send me to some home where I'd spend my life making brooms or weaving baskets, learning to accept my limitations." The chords grew slightly louder, more complex. But my mama, Aretha Robinson, she had different ideas. She told me, "Ray, there ain't no such thing as can't. You hear me? God took your sight, but he didn't take your hands. He didn't take your ears. He didn't take your mind. And he sure didn't take your heart." Ray's voice cracked slightly with emotion, but he pushed forward. "She taught me to do everything the other kids could do. She made me chop wood even though I couldn't see the blade or the tree. She made me find my way around the house without help, letting me bump into furniture and walls until I learned. When I cried, she held me, but she never, ever let me quit." The music under his fingers was becoming recognizable now. Georgia on my mind, but softer, more intimate than anyone had ever heard it. "So you ask me how I know what keys I'm hitting? I know because I've played this piano so many times that my fingers remember every inch of it. I know because I can hear the difference between a C and a C sharp better than most people with perfect vision can see it. I know because my mama taught me that blindness is a condition, not a prison sentence."
He turned his face back toward the audience, toward the spot where the heckler sat. "I know because I refuse to let what I can't do stop me from doing what I can. And brother, I can play the hell out of this piano." The arena erupted, not with applause yet, but with something else, a collective intake of breath, a moment of recognition, of understanding. The drunk man in the third row was openly weeping now, his head in his hands. Ray continued, his voice gentle now, almost conversational. "Every single person in this building has something they can't do. Maybe you can't see, maybe you can't hear, maybe you can't walk, or you can't read, or you can't find the courage to chase your dreams. But here's what I learned, and I hope you listen. What you can't do doesn't define you. What you choose to do with what you can do, that's what makes you who you are." He began playing again, this time with full force, and his voice rose with the music. "So when somebody tells you that you can't do something because of how you were born, or what you look like, or what limitations you have, you look them in the eye, even if your eyes can't see, and you show them that they're wrong. You show them with every breath you take, every step you walk, every note you play." The orchestra joined in, and the Raelettes began to hum in harmony, the song building now, becoming something more than just Georgia on my mind. It was becoming an anthem of perseverance, of dignity, of human possibility. I've played for presidents and kings. I've won Grammys and gold records. I've made music that's touched millions of people around the world. And you know what? I did every bit of it without seeing a single thing. Because my mama was right. There ain't no such thing as can't. Then he sang, and his voice was pure power, pure emotion, pure soul. Georgia, Georgia, the whole day through. 15,000 people rose to their feet as one. Some were clapping, some were crying, some were doing both. The Raylettes were crying as they sang backup, their voices cracking with emotion, but never faltering. The drunk man in the third row stood up, tears streaming down his face. Security guards had reached him by now, ready to escort him out, but Ray sensed the movement and held up his hand again. "Leave him be," Ray said into the microphone. "Ain't nobody getting kicked out of my show tonight. We all come here with our demons, and we all gotta face 'em sometime. Maybe tonight was his night." After the song ended, during the standing ovation that lasted for more than 5 minutes, something remarkable happened. The heckler pushed his way forward through the crowd, stumbling down the aisle toward the stage. Security moved to intercept him, but Ray somehow sensed it and called out, "Let him come." The man reached the edge of the stage, looking up at Ray with red, swollen eyes. "Mr. Charles," he said, his voice breaking, "I am so sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry."
Ray nodded slowly, his sightless eyes looking past the man, but somehow still seeing him. "What's your name, brother?" "Douglas. Douglas Mitchell." "Well, Douglas Mitchell, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to remember it." Ray's voice was kind now, without a trace of anger. "You came here tonight thinking you were better than me because you can see and I can't. But the truth is, we're all just trying to find our way in the dark. Some of us just happen to have a little more practice at it." The man broke down completely, sobbing at the foot of the stage. Ray gestured to his band. "Somebody get Douglas here a chair. He's going to sit right up here on stage for the rest of the show. I want him to see what a blind man can do when he stops worrying about what he can't do and focuses on what he can." And that's exactly what happened. Douglas Mitchell sat on stage for the remaining hour of the concert, watching Ray Charles perform with an artistry and passion that seemed to come from somewhere beyond human capability. He watched as Ray's fingers flew across the keys without ever missing a note. He watched as Ray conducted his 17-piece orchestra with subtle gestures and head nods, keeping them perfectly in sync despite never seeing them. He watched as Ray connected with 15,000 people through nothing but the power of his music and his spirit. When the concert finally ended, Douglas Mitchell stood and shook Ray's hand. "You've changed my life tonight," he said. "I'll never forget this. Never." Ray smiled, that famous Ray Charles smile that seemed to see straight through to a person's soul. "Good. Now go home and change somebody else's life. Pass it on. That's how we make the world better, one changed heart at a time." The story of that night spread like wildfire. Within days, newspapers across the country were running articles about the blind musician who'd responded to mockery with grace, to hatred with love, to ignorance with education. Douglas Mitchell himself wrote a letter to the Tribune from Chicago, published a week later, in which he described his transformation and urged others to reconsider their prejudices and limitations. But the real impact went deeper than headlines. Hundreds of people who were at that concert later reported it changed how they saw their own limitations. Parents of blind children wrote letters to Ray thanking him for showing their kids what was possible. Veterans who'd lost their sight in combat reached out to say that his words had given them hope.
Ray kept those broken sunglasses for the rest of his life. They sat on his dressing room table at every subsequent concert, a reminder of the night he stood exposed and vulnerable in front of 15,000 people and turned it into a moment of profound human connection.
Years later, in his autobiography, Brother Ray, Charles reflected on that night. "Some people thought I was angry when that man mocked me," he wrote. "But I wasn't angry. I was just tired of people thinking that not seeing meant not being. My mama taught me better than that, and I made it my mission to teach others." The night Ray Charles' sunglasses shattered wasn't just about one drunk heckler learning a lesson. It was about 15,000 people, and eventually millions more who heard the story, learning that human dignity isn't defined by perfect bodies or unlimited abilities. It's defined by how we respond when life takes something from us, and what we choose to do with what remains. Ray Charles played piano for another 40 years after that night. He won 17 Grammy Awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award. He performed for presidents, revolutionized soul music, broke down racial barriers, and inspired countless musicians. But many people who knew him well said that the moment he stood on that stage without his sunglasses, exposed and vulnerable but unbroken, was perhaps his finest performance of all. Because that night, he didn't just play music. He taught 15,000 people, including one drunk heckler who desperately needed the lesson, that the only real disability is refusing to see the possibilities within yourself. And he did it with such grace, such dignity, and such profound humanity that nobody who witnessed it ever forgot. In the end, Ray Charles proved something his mother had known all along. When you can't see with your eyes, you learn to see with your heart. And that kind of vision is the most powerful sight of all. If this incredible story of grace, dignity, and human resilience moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their limitations don't define them, their choices do. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone turned hatred into love or mockery into teaching? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more inspiring true stories about music's greatest legends and the moments that made them immortal.